Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a total head-scratcher of a topic, drawing on some truly brilliant psychological insights from Paul Bloom. We are going to unpack what we're calling the Parenthood Paradox. Basically, why in the world in our modern society do people continue to voluntarily choose to have kids? We're going to break down the data, the psychology behind it, and the deeply rooted search for meaning that drives this massive life choice.
It's a wildly provocative question, right? Why have kids if they actually make you less happy? I mean, if we look at this from a strictly Darwinian survival of the fittest point of view, it's a no-brainer. The animals that weren't hardwired to have and protect babies simply didn't leave behind descendants. Paul Bloom actually jokes that there were probably some early primate ancestors of ours who looked at a baby and thought, wow, what a delicious source of fat and protein, and just ate them. But obviously, those genes didn't exactly prosper compared to the ones that made our ancestors go, oh, how adorable, I need to protect this with my life. But here is where it gets super interesting for us today. As modern reflective humans, we have total flexibility. We can have sex without having kids. The strict biological mandate, it's kind of gone. So why on earth do we still do it when, from a purely hedonic, pleasure-seeking standpoint, choosing to be a parent is honestly baffling?
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Parenthood Paradox and the True Cost of Raising Children.
Because to understand why people want kids, we have to look at what they are actually signing up for, and the negatives are glaringly obvious. You absolutely do not need a psychologist to tell you that kids are a massive money drain, or about the constant low-level anxiety, the severe sleep deprivation, or the fact that they literally consume all of your free time. But the studies highlight something else that is really striking. For couples who have kids, children are the #1 source of fighting, argument, and tension. Think about that. It's not the in-laws, it's not sex, it's not money, it's the kids. So if we're just tallying up the daily data, it's really hard to definitively say whether having children is a net positive or a net negative.
But despite all of that incredibly bleak data, people almost never look back and say, wow, what a total disaster that was. Bad move on my part. In fact, when you actually show parents this mountain of evidence proving that kids don't make them happier on a day-to-day basis, you usually get this profound, stubborn response. Well, that's not why I have kids. That's not why I love my kids. They just completely dismiss the entire premise that daily happiness was ever the goal in the first place.
To understand that reaction, we need to completely rethink how we define joy. So, Section 2, 2 types of happiness, using Danny Kahneman's framework.
And this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating divide in how the human brain works. Kahneman splits happiness into 2 totally different categories. First, you've got experienced happiness. That is your moment-to-moment joy. If I tap you on the shoulder on a random Tuesday at 3 p.m. and ask, hey, how's it going? For parents, this experienced happiness is surprisingly low. Why? Because they're stressed, they're exhausted, or they're actively negotiating with a toddler throwing a tantrum. But then you have remembered happiness. This is how much you liked the experience when you're looking back on it. And for parents, this metric is off the charts.
So why the huge disconnect? Well, science writer Jennifer Senior proposes a really fascinating explanation. Our memories are heavily distorted. We are biologically wired to remember the peaks, the beautiful, shining, golden moments. When a parent looks back on raising a child, they have a million wonderful memories that they return to and nurture over and over again. The experienced happiness, the million diaper changes, waking up at 3 a.m. to soothe a screaming baby, the brain literally just hits delete on all of that suffering as time goes by.
But here's the thing, memory distortion alone doesn't fully explain the active, conscious choice to step into the hardship of parenting. For that, we turn to Section 3, Motivational Pluralism Explained, and Seeking More Than Pleasure.
This brings us to a really key academic concept called motivational pluralism. It's basically the psychological reality that human beings are incredibly complex. We don't just want a simple, continuous dopamine hit. We aren't just pursuing a single one-track life of superficial pleasure. Our desires are messy. They run in multiple, sometimes entirely contradictory directions, all at the exact same time.
Let's actually break down those core desires. Step 1? Yes, obviously, we absolutely want pleasure. We like comfort. We like joy. Step 2? We want to be good. We have a drive for moral standing. But step 3, this is the crucial one for our paradox today. We want meaning. And we want purpose. And meaning, in the broad psychological sense, is intimately and fundamentally tied to heavy-duty suffering and difficulty. Think about it. You rarely find deep, transformative meaning sitting on a beach, sipping a margarita. You find it in the struggle.
Now, what's really interesting when we look at the numbers here is how clearly that struggle pays off. When researchers ask people a very simple, blunt question, is your life meaningful? The results are striking. Parents report significantly higher levels of overarching life meaning compared to non-parents. Sure, they might have way less experienced happiness on that random Tuesday afternoon, but their overarching sense of purpose is vastly elevated, precisely because of the heavy-duty difficulty they are tackling every single day. This brings us to a major philosophical crossroads in Section 4, a transformative experience, and why you really can't weigh the pros and cons.
If having kids is full of daily pain but leads to long-term meaning, how do you sit down and calculate if it's the right choice? So the crucial point is, you can't. You literally cannot run a cost-benefit analysis on having children. Paul Bloom brings in his colleague, philosopher Lori Paul, who calls parenthood a transformative experience. This is an experience that alters you so completely, so fundamentally, that you cannot possibly project beforehand what it will actually feel like. The person you are right now, making that pro-con calculation, is simply not the person you will be after the event happens.
Because the act of becoming a parent completely rewires your internal compass from the ground up. You are going to emerge on the other side with totally different priorities, different interests, entirely new biological and psychological drives, and different life experiences. This is exactly why Bloom suggests that if you're on the fence about having kids, don't just stare at the mixed data of pros and cons. The data's just way too messy. Instead, you need to explore how the idea of parenthood meshes with who you are right now, and more importantly, who you want to become.
As we wrap up, we need to cover Section 5, the path to meaning, and the multiple routes to fulfillment.
I want to pause here and add an incredibly vital caveat straight from the source material. When we compare these two paths, we see a complete picture of human meaning. On one hand, yes, parents find deep, profound purpose through the intense difficulties of raising children. But on the other hand, it is equally, unequivocally true that non-parents, whether that's due to life circumstances or a deliberate choice, live very rich, highly fulfilling lives. Bloom emphasizes this heavily. There is absolutely more than one valid route to meaning in human life. Having kids is not some strict prerequisite for a meaningful existence. Full stop.
But for those who do choose the path of parenthood, this right here is the ultimate resolution to our paradox. The drive to have children isn't just some archaic, leftover urge to populate the universe, and it certainly isn't an attempt to scratch an itch for daily fleeting happiness. It is instead a deliberate step into the profound, the difficult, and the deeply rewarding. It is part and parcel of building a meaningful life.
Which leaves us with this final, honestly, kind of intense thought to take away today. If you are currently weighing this monumental choice, the question isn't, will a baby make me happy today? The real question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to undergo a heavy-duty experience that fundamentally changes who you are in exchange for a completely new kind of meaning? It's a really tough call, but hopefully mapping it out this way has given you a clearer lens to view it through. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.